The views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
This is the latest disclosure, a report from National Civil Defense Headquarters in Washington. It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder.
Wait a minute, something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror.
Welcome to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
And it's Tuesday, and you know what that means, and I'm so excited for it. It is After Hours AM. Tuesday nights, of course, means Deeper Cuts. And my name is Greg Bakken, and I am joined by my co-host tonight, Joel Sturgis. Joel, how are you doing?
You know, I'm doing awesome, man. It's great. It's another Tuesday night, and that only means one thing's around these parts, and that is After Hours AM Deeper Cuts. You're absolutely correct, Greg. Great show on tap tonight, though. Top of, actually, bottom of the hour, we're going to have Michael J. Worden on the show with us, Greg.
We sure will.
And, you know, just to let everyone know, we're at the top, and he wrote one of the coolest books I've heard in a long time, read in a long time, The Murder of Richard Jennings, the true story of New York's, get around my own tongue, first murder for hire, man. That will be at the bottom of the hour. We're going to have Michael with us, so that'll be a lot of fun. Man, what else is going on? I know we got a ton of stuff going on.
Oh, my goodness. You're absolutely right. And the thing about the Michael J. Worden book is that when I was reading it, there are so many questions that I have had from it because it's so good. I cannot wait to talk about it tonight. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it really is a cool story. I mean, not for the guy that was killed, of course, but for the rest of it, it's a pretty cool story.
And just for a little bit of reference to people listening, that murder for hire took place nearly 200 years ago.
It did. I didn't put that together until just now, 1818, you're right. So 2018 coming up 200 years ago already. Wow, time flies, and evidently
time flies, yes.
Murder never takes a vacation.
No, it doesn't. So we're going to be talking about that in about 30 minutes or so. So please stick around for that. But one of the things that we should probably talk about, and for those who, and I don't know about you, Joel, I've gotten a lot of people who contacted me and they're jealous because they're not in the Minnesota area. And the one thing that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now has been the event at the Palmer House that's going to happen this weekend with the Things That Go Bump Minnesota group putting on this fantastic show. But the thing that we should also let everyone know about is something special that's going to be happening on Thursday night at the Palmer House. Joel, what's going to happen on Thursday night?
After Hours AM is invading the Palmer House. We're going to do a live remote. Invading. We are that vanguard of a foreign army from Mars coming in, except we're from, Duluth, and you're from the cities.
St. Michael, Minnesota.
St. Michael, but, we're still invading, and we're going to do a complete 100%, all fun, all games, remote, live from the Palmer House. Not going to miss that one.
No, and one of the things that we wanted to quickly talk about with that, for those who can show up on Thursday, if you're planning on being a part of the event from Friday and Saturday night, or you're in the Sauk Center or want to be a part of our remote, you come up there. We're going to be giving away a spirit box.
And that's because Greg loves these people. I'm telling you, Greg, and that is courtesy of both Things That Go Bump Minnesota and, of course, Minnesota Ghost Box.
Absolutely, it is, and so we're not quite sure what we're going to make people do to have a chance to win it yet.
Well, I'm big on boxing. I'm thinking that we
boxing.
haven't had a good throwdown in a long time.
I like it.
Maybe a 3-round battle royale, and whoever's left standing gets the ghost box, and the rest of them they can contact in the ghost box. It's all good.
Well, yeah, because that's the only way to contact them at that point, assuming we do the usual rules for this sort of thing. Yeah,
50 people enter, only one leaves.
I'm looking forward to that, of course. But yeah, well, you come on out to the Palmer on Thursday this week, and it's going to be the regular after hours show. That's on Thursday. Eric Olson's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Joel, of course, is going to be there.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a blast. I can't wait to get to the Palmer. Like I said, I've never been there yet. So this is my first time. I am looking forward to meeting everybody there, of course, and getting to know the people will be at the event. It'll be a lot of fun, and, you just cannot go wrong with the Palmer House. It is actually, really, USA Today said it is the most haunted hotel in America.
And just to sweeten the pot for those who are on the kind of the cusp of deciding whether or not to go, there is a special one-day sale that today only you would get a $25 gift card to the Palmer House when you purchase 2 tickets to the event this weekend. So they must be purchased by 11:59 p.m. tonight, which is August 8th. So you better hurry. And don't miss out. And you can get your tickets at, of course, www.thingsthatgobump, MN, as in Minnesota.com. And I'm going to read that one more time, www.thingsthatgobump.mn.com. Go there, get your tickets, get your gift card, come to the Palmer Thursday night, and get your spirit box if you're lucky enough to win it. But it may not be easy to do so. And we're trying to figure that part out.
And Greg is going to be there giving it away. And, ladies, I'm just saying he's single. I'm just throwing it out there.
Do you like people with oddly shaped beards? Then I'm your guy. I really am. Come on out.
I'm just joking with you. But anyhow, the folks definitely want to come and get that ghost box. Come and meet us. Hang out with us a little bit because we love hanging out with people. We don't bite anymore. Not since the incident. So
no, not since the lawsuit.
No. Ever since that restraining order stuff, nope, haven't bitten anyone since. So you will be safe. Don't worry about that.
But, also something on a serious note to point out, you come out to the Palmer, whether it's for the event, come out for Thursday night, you want to have a very serious and really good conversation about doing paranormal investigations, how to do it, good feedback on it. Us, the folks at Things That Go Bump, Ryan and John, Nicole's going to be out there. We're going to be able to have great conversations and really talk about it. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. You get to learn basically ghost hunting, paranormal investigation 101 from some of the best out there. So,
absolutely.
It's a rare opportunity, and really, I got to say the tickets are very they're really reasonably priced. A lot of people have asked me, well, this kind of event, how much is it? And I say, well, how much do you think an event like this would be? $150? I don't know. And I said, try like 60. No, yeah, you get all that for $60. That's it. And you get to stay at the Palmer if you choose to.
And I don't care what anyone says. When you find a group of people, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm not talking about Joel, I'm talking about the Ryans and Johns, who's going to want to be so open and honest about what they've done and how they do their investigations. I mean, honestly, I personally don't think you could learn from better people. This is well worth your time and money.
Yeah, so come on down. There's only a few tickets left. I mean, they are flying off the shelf. Grab a ticket, grab 2 tickets, grab 5 tickets, because there isn't that many left. I only think there's like maybe 10 left, and that's it.
Yeah.
10 tickets, that's it. So if you have a group and you'd like to come into the Palmer, if you've always said to yourself, how can I get my group into the Palmer? Why don't you bring them with you? Bring a bunch of friends. Come in, have a good time, and be part of that kind of that learning. And, of course, the madness that, of course, we'll bring on Thursday. But then after that, after Thursday, it becomes very, very interesting, very cool. you get to hear from a lot of people that normally you might not be able to hear from firsthand. So definitely it's going to be a great event. I recommend everybody show up.
Absolutely. Before we move on to haunted headlines, one more time, you get a $25 gift card today only if you sign up before midnight. It's www.thingsthatgobumpmn.com. Please check it out. It's going to be great.
Absolutely.
So, Joel.
Yo.
Why don't we do? I think we only need one haunted headline tonight, to be honest, and it's one that I find very frightening, actually, when I'm reading through it, and I think that we should go through this at least as far as we can get because I think they're very interesting.
Okay, and I'm looking at the headline right now, and I gotta say, as a father, my children have had some creepy imaginary friends that made me go, oh my God, get away from me with that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to talk about is parents describe their child's disturbing imaginary friends. And, the one of two things is going to happen with these. One is that you're going to find that your kids are having an imaginary friend that is a spirit, or your kids are demented. It's one of the two.
Well, they're either going to need an exorcism or they're going to need medication. One of those two is going to go down.
Absolutely, absolutely. Joel, do you want me to start us off here?
I will pop this cork and I'll ask you or read the headline. You fill us in. Number 1, sign of the cross.
So a parent had said, my daughter used to tell me about a man who came into her room every night and put the sign of the cross on her forehead. I thought it was just a dream. Then my mother-in-law sent over some family photos. My daughter looked right at the picture of my husband's father, who had been dead for about 16 years, and said, that's the man who comes in my room at night. My husband later told me his father would always do the sign of the cross on his forehead when he was young.
Wow, that is creepy and yet heartwarming all at the same time. I don't know what to really think of that. I think I'd be like, hey, get the hell out of here, Dad. I've had enough of you already. Just leave her alone. And why don't you come do that to my forehead anymore, huh? Now you really make me feel good. Okay, number 2 is Creeper Man.
So my son, from the age of 3, always tells me about the Creeper Man who lives in my mom and dad's bedroom.
Oh, no.
Yeah, all righty.
Oh.
He brings it up after he visits them. I made the mistake once of asking what he looks like. My son said, oh, he doesn't have a face.
Oh, good. That sounds great. Oh, that's heartwarming again right there. Just have him show up. Oh, by the way, there's a guy in your room.
Which actually works because I know people who don't have a spine. So I suppose it's kind of along the same lines.
Well,
really.
sure, I suppose. But my God, I don't want to hear from a little kid all about someone living in my room.
Probably not paranormal, but yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. He's the hobo. He's a hobo is what he is. He's been living rent-free in my walk-in closet. That would explain why when I go to get clothes, they're handed to me every morning. Number 3 is Kelly.
When my daughter was 3, she had an imaginary friend named Kelly who lived in her closet. Kelly sat in a locked rocking chair while she slept, played with her, etc. Typical imaginary friend stuff. Anyway, fast forward 2 years later, the wife and I are watching the new Amityville, that's how good things always happen, right?
Always.
The one with Ryan Reynolds. And our daughter walks out right when the dead girl goes all black-eyed. Far from being disturbed, she said, that looks like Kelly. Kelly who, we say? You know, the dead girl that lived in my closet.
Jeez.
Well, duh, of course.
I like that. You know who it is. You're the one that put her there.
Yeah, Kelly. Yeah.
Kelly. Okay.
The one with no soul. Remember her?
The black-eyed child that decided to move in with us. Okay, number 4 is Roger.
Oh, I know a couple Rogers. My little brother's imaginary friend Roger lived under a coffee table. I mean, if you can't find a place.
Well,
right?
I suppose you have to put a cardboard box under the overpass.
Roger had a wife, goodness, and 9 kids.
Under the table?
Right. I mean, it's spacious, is what I understand.
Wow.
Yeah, it has a lot of amenities also.
It
Roger
does.
and his family lived peacefully alongside us for 3 years. One day, my little brother announced that Roger wouldn't be around anymore since he shot and killed him
Oh my
and
God.
his whole family.
What? The little brother went Rambo on him?
The little kid has shot and killed Roger and his 9 kids, and I'm assuming his wife also. I don't know if he remembers any of this, but his genuine lack of remorse was very disturbing.
As he's grabbing a soda. You don't have to worry about Roger anymore. Why is that? I killed his family and him. Oh.
So do you know where I can get a shovel? Why? I need to bury Roger and
Yeah.
10 other people.
Yeah, you got a lime hanging around and maybe a number 2 shovel. Like, I got some business to take care of. Just don't ask the business. Just point me in the direction.
Don't you worry about what I'm doing.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of our sponsors, which is Ace Hardware, folks. They have lime and shovels.
and acid.
And acid, muriatic works the best. Just saying, folks, all you would-be body disposal people, what we've learned on True Crime Wednesday is muriatic acid works the best. Okay, number 5, Easter Bunny.
Well, that can only be good things, right?
It only can be.
When I was 16, I babysat twins who were in the 3rd grade at the time. They always spoke of a man in the Easter Bunny costume, and they were terrified of him, I'm sure for no good reason.
Oh, of course.
One day, I was babysitting, and one twin was in the shower. His brother and I were sitting downstairs watching television when all of a sudden he said, you need to go check on Matt. Seconds later, Matt yelled, "He's in here! He's in here!" I ran upstairs. I had to check every room before I could calm down. I'm not sure which part of the experience freaked me out the most.
Wow.
You know, I kind of expected a little bit more from that. I'm going to be honest.
I was hoping that the bunny would be rabid, and it would be in there going, "I'm going to take your soul, children." And that just didn't happen. I was waiting for the payoff, and that was it. Although Matt screaming, "He's in here! He's in here! Help me!"
Yeah.
That's all we got out of that.
I have a pretty dark mind, so yeah, this was pretty.
Well, I was waiting
good.
for the Easter Bunny to be decapitating family members in that one. That just never. There was no payoff there. If that was a movie, that'd be a horrible movie. I'd say worst movie ever on my way out.
Joel, here's a true story. Okay, when I don't get along with my neighbors in my neighborhood, which is odd because I'm so likable. But what happened one day, and this is when I was still married, and I still live in this house today. I looked outside one day, and we had this bench, this swinging bench, right to the side of the front door.
Okay.
And on it was a decapitated bunny's head.
Oh, no.
So, of course, what did I do? But I took it inside and stewed it and ate it later.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I mean,
of
that's neither here nor there. I don't know to this day if it was a dog that used to run around and ripped it apart, which I hope it was, or people telling me to get out of the neighborhood, which is both are very viable stories.
Oh, you mean it was a real bunny head?
Well, what kind of bunny head do you think
I thought maybe it was Easter time as well as stuffed bunnies or whatever, but no, it was the real deal. Wow.
Do stuffed bunnies have blood coming out all over the place?
Not generally. Not generally speaking. Not unless you order them that way.
Not in my experience.
Not unless you order them that way. Okay, number 6 on this list is the captain.
A parent of one of my students told us in a meeting that she was concerned because her son, who was 7 years old, talked about an invisible ghost who would talk to him and play with him in his room. He said the ghost was called the captain and was an old white guy with a beard. The kid would tell his mom that the captain told him when he grows up, his job will be to kill people.
Oh, my God.
And that child was named Greg Bakken. No. And the captain would tell him who needed to be killed. That's not creepy at all.
No,
the kid would cry and say he doesn't want to kill people when he grows up, but the captain tells him he doesn't have a choice, and he'll get used to killing after a while.
He'll get used to it.
Now that's quality.
That is right there. He's teaching the kid a valuable trade, is what he's doing.
Yeah,
how to kill the impunity and get over it all at the same time. So that's therapy all at once right there.
And that might have also helped out with the Richard Jennings killing. We'll find out later if the captain was involved with that.
We will find out if maybe I'm the one that killed him. We're going to find out.
That's a fantastic story. I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Number 7, Boy in the Tree.
My folks' farm surround a cemetery, and my dad and my niece are walking down there. My niece, who's 4, looks up and says, "What's that boy doing up in the tree?" There was no boy, but she insisted there was and could describe him.
Oh. That one fell flat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, try again, right?
The Mighty Spin is the handle. You spun flat, my friend.
I mean, you're a national radio, Mighty.
Come on, Mighty Spin. Pick it up a little bit. Number 8 is another rabbit. Bad Rabbit.
Bad Rabbit. My cousin, when she was 5 and I was 17, had a stuffed rabbit that she talked to and carried everywhere. One day, she was asleep on the couch while I was watching her, and she woke up and started yelling at her rabbit for no reason. One minute, she was knocked out. The next, she was awake, glaring at the rabbit, yelling, "No, you can't do that. That's bad. Don't do it."
Wow.
I asked her what was wrong, tried to get her to stop, but she wouldn't listen. I finally just took the rabbit up to her room, and when I came back down, she was asleep on the couch again. Whatever that rabbit was planning on doing, who knows?
All right.
Wow.
Well, all right, Tree Thompson. Thank you for the uninspiring story again. But hey, it's all the effort, right?
Nothing is topping the captain at the moment.
No, right now the captain is king. Number 9, punishment.
Oh, my favorite word. I was 17 and babysitting a friend of the family, 6-year-old. He'd been in bed for a couple of hours, and I just peeked in to check on him. He wasn't in the bed, and when I opened the door wider, I saw he was standing in the corner facing the wall.
Oh, that would be creepy. Okay, I'm sorry. I have to cut in on here.
Right.
If I went in there and I saw some little kid just sitting in the corner, stare at the wall like all Blair Witch style, I would not be cool with that.
I mean, to be honest, so far so good, right?
Yes.
So, obviously, as they say, creepiest thing ever.
Oh, yeah.
I asked him what he was doing, and all he did was turn around, smile, and put his finger to his lips as if to say, shh. I asked him again what he was doing, and all he says is, "Leave us. It is the punishment."
Well, that sounds like something from a movie. Come on. But still creepy, don't get me wrong. And laughing why at us, whatever your handle is, well played. I mean, it really kind of got me there. Children inherently are scary anyway. Number 10, though, might be our number. That might be the winner. I don't know, judging by the picture here of the ugly clown. Number 10 is Red Eyes.
Yeah, that clown is really doing it. When my boy was 4, his imaginary friend would sit in the corner of the room when you switched off the lights, and light the room with red glowing eyes. Can I read that again? Because I'm not quite following it. When my boy was 4, his imaginary friend would sit in the corner of the room when you'd switch off the lights and light the room with red glowing eyes. So did everyone see this?
Exactly. Come on, Starling Kong. You got to tell us a little bit more about this story, Starling UK or whatever your handle is over there. I don't know. It's creepy, but not as creepy as I was expecting, having that creepy clown sitting there. Number 11, though. This might scare everybody. The Lady.
The Lady. When my nephew was 3 or 4, there was a lady that sat at the end of his bed most nights. He said she had old clothes. Well, so do I. I mean, come on.
Yeah, come on. I haven't gone shopping in a while.
I can't afford anything better.
This economy, who can?
Right? So, okay, I back up a little bit. He said she had old clothes and would often keep him awake at night talking to him. He got really worked up when no one else could see her and adamant the lady was there and would visit him at night. He spoke about her with such conviction. My sister moved house shortly after. Recently, her one-year-old, my niece, had been seen at roughly the same time, around 3:45 a.m., a few nights, stood in the corner of her cot, talking or babbling to an empty corner of the room. Freaky.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, right? I think my sister will soon be able to build a new house with the amount of bricks that have recently been outputted, I guess, right?
Yeah, that have been defecated. That have been defecated upon this revelation of creepiness.
Meanwhile, at the FCC.
Yeah, meanwhile, the FCC, they're writing bills out right now to us. No, but that is creepy. Another creepy one, okay.
But here's my thing about that, Joel.
Yeah.
Now, if her one-year-old niece was like, "It's the lady," That would have been creepy. But, I mean, really, there isn't anything that ties the two together.
Well, I think you're right. There's really nothing that ties it together. It was still creepy. It really was, but you can never get a creepier than two names put together at the same time. They're the same name. Number 12 was Jim.
Oh, really? Mine says Joel.
Well,
No,
see,
wow.
it changes for different people.
My mom tells me that when I was really young, I had an imaginary friend named Jim that, as I used to say, she says, had black eyes, black hair, and looks like paper.
Ooh.
She and I assumed that I meant that it had really white skin. It creeped her out because Jim was one of the first things she ever heard me say, and she had always found me laughing or crying at a certain corner of my bedroom since I was a few months old. Now, just to be fair, I'm in my cube at work, and I cry every day. So I don't know if you could really say that.
That is true. I mean, you don't know if that's stress or
it
anxiety.
Might be two different things, so I don't know.
Who knows?
So what pushed her over the edge was one night she heard me scream and start crying. I was 4 when this happened, and she just assumed I had a nightmare. When she asked what was wrong, I pointed to the corner of the room and said, Jim's mad, and she says she wants me to hurt you. Then I started crying and apologizing at the corner of the room about telling her that.
My God, that's another creepy one. I mean,
now that's creepy, yes.
Well, it always involves a corner of the room, though, generally. I've noticed a theme here. All the creepy things happen in the corner.
But a happy ending.
Yes, a happy ending. And
there was no mention of Jim in the house after that.
Well, good. Well, that's good. Maybe Jim got the hell out, and he's no longer coming back because rent was due.
But they brought in Slim Jim with Macho Man Randy Savage.
Oh, yeah. Snapping the Slim Jim. Yeah, exactly. He walked in there and says, and then another guy came in and says, what you gonna do, brother? What you gonna do?
Is that Hulk Hogan?
That was Hulk Hogan. That was my best rendition.
That's where it's at. Yep. I love it.
That's my best rendition of both. The Mega Powers coming together one more time. Okay, we got 3 minutes left. We're going to do narrator's choice. Which one do you want to hit us up with?
Why don't we just stay in line and let's do number 13.
All right, Emily.
I'll read this fast. When my sister was probably 6 or 7, she had an imaginary friend named Emily. She told us Emily lived in her closet, wore an old black dress, and had long dark hair, and she was the same age as my sister. My sister played with Emily constantly. My parents started noticing my sister acting weird, just sitting in the middle of her room, whispering to Emily quite a bit, and acting a lot more distant towards her. I remember a very specific day. My brother was walking by her room, and my sister was sitting in the middle of the room. But she turned around and hissed at him. He was scared like crazy.
Damn.
He told me it didn't even look like my sister.
Red rum. Sorry.
Exactly. No kidding. My parents ran up to her room, and I could hear my sister just screaming and screaming. I have no doubt what happened in that room, but I ran to the bottom of the stairs, and the screaming stopped. I saw my parents holding my sister, crying their eyes out. She was sobbing as well. I've asked her about it today. She's 24 now. She told me that Emily used to tell her to do horrible things to herself. Oh, my God. She actually used to wake up on the roof and not remember how she got there. She's not kidding. She said this is real.
While you're there, fix the shingles.
Right? Do something constructive. Apparently, Emily absolutely hated my parents, so she turned my sister against them. She hates talking about it, so I never brought it up that specific night. Now, if it was me, I'd always bring it up.
I would. I'd live on that thing.
This all happened at my old house. When we moved to a different house, Emily was gone. I'm not making any of this up. My sister's little friend was a really big deal to my family and messed things up for a long time. I'm just relieved we left that house.
Wow, that is creepy. I mean, not only having that all go on, but being up on the roof, and especially not fixing anything on the roof. If I were the parents, I'd be pretty mad because I'm a big believer in child labor.
No slackers.
No slackers around here. If they're going to be up there, they better have some hot tar in their hand. That's all I'm saying. Hey, man, we got to run a break. We come back. We're going to talk to Michael J. Worden. It's going to be a lot of fun because not only is Michael J. Worden a paranormal author, which we've had him on the show before, but he's got a new book out there, The Murder of Richard Jennings, the true story of New York's first murder-for-hire case. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
In 1999, The Exorcist was voted the scariest movie of all time.
Your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself.
Entertainment Weekly calls it the most viscerally harrowing movie ever made.
That thing upstairs isn't my daughter.
The most electrifying movie of the 20th century is now coming back to theaters.
Where's Reagan?
In here with us.
Author William Peter Blatty and director William Friedkin have created an expanded, thrilling new version of The Exorcist with footage that has never been seen before.
She needs a priest.
Don't miss The Exorcist in the version you've never seen. Possessing theaters everywhere. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
And that typing that you hear is the one and only Greg Bakken.
Can you hear my typing?
We did hear your typing, so, sir,
I can't,
the mic is yours.
I can't hear the music, so you might as well hear my typing, right?
That's right. There's nothing wrong with a little typing. Anyhow, welcome back to After Hours AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me.
I'm Greg Bakken, and we are coming back to our second half hour already, Joel. I mean, that didn't take long at all, did it?
No, it did not. And I threw a little Midnight Syndicate in there for our bumpers because everyone's asking who that music is. It fit nicely with our Strange Child segment.
It is a Strange Child segment. We're gonna switch gears, though, okay?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to go and talk to our guest tonight, which I'm really excited to talk about. And we're going to have Michael J. Worden on in a couple seconds here. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about his newest book, which is called The Murder of Richard Jennings. It's a true story of New York's first murder for hire. And we're going to talk about that for a little while. And I have a lot of questions about it myself, Joel. And then we're going to talk about some of his paranormal stuff that he has going on, too.
Yeah, Mike is more than just a pretty face. He's multifaceted. We've had him on the show before, and he's always been a fan favorite and actually a good friend of ours via social network, and I always enjoy talking to Mike. It's always definitely a pleasure. But get this, Greg, Mike is more than just that. He is also one of our heroes in blue. He is an active police detective, and for that we want to thank him because, man, that is a hard job, sometimes a thankless job, and we got to make sure to remember our boys and ladies and gentlemen in blue, definitely. And Mike, to kind of bring you in just really quick, I'm going to allow you to tell us about yourself because you do it so much better than I could or Greg could.
Thank you. I'm not even sure where to begin. As you mentioned, I'm a real police officer.
Yep.
I actually just started my 19th year in law enforcement.
That's amazing,
this past,
man.
July 26th.
Well, thank you again for keeping our community safe, and we really have a lot of respect in the show for anyone wearing the uniform. And again, thanks a ton.
Thank you.
So, we'll talk a little bit more about your background and stuff, but, right away, I want to talk a little bit about the book, The Murder of Richard Jennings, a true story of New York's first murder for hire. And for people, and we talked a little bit about this in the first half hour, is that the murder we're talking about here happened in 1818. So we're talking about nearly 200 years ago that this happened. What is it about this that you're just like, I need to tell this story?
It really was. It was really an accidental story to begin with, because I had started researching a couple of other true crimes, one of which had occurred in Albany, New York, back in the 1820s. And one of the footnotes in that case was this 1818 murder in Orange County, New York. That's where I live. It's where I've grown up. And when I was reading the footnote, it's talking about, this murder for hire, 5 people standing trial, 4 people sentenced to die. And I'm thinking, I grew up in Orange County, went to school in Orange County, and I've never heard anything about this. So I decided to do a little bit of a peek at it. And those first few articles that I was able to find on the internet just really fueled my passion to learn more, because there was so many weird legends and stories mixed in that I'm like, this is interesting not only as a police officer, but just as someone who likes history. And I just had to know more. And the more I read about it, the more I wanted to know. It just became even more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when I was getting ready for the show, both reading the book and then doing my own internet search, there's not a ton on this particular case. You really have to dig to get some good meat on it.
Yes, I did. It took, several years of a lot of research, a lot of patience, really tracking, sources down online, calling libraries, visiting different libraries and archives, just to get the information that I could get to really tell the true story of what happened.
Well, and it's crazy. There are 6 people who are mainly involved with this case, but yet and for anyone reading the book, you're looking at a very detailed outlook of the entire system. How did you keep it all straight?
Oh boy, it was not easy, because when I was actually doing all the research, I have a banker's box full of all my files just on this book alone.
Sure.
So when it came down to actually writing the book, excuse me, I really broke it up, and I thought, okay, I want to tell this story, but I want to make it fun to read. I want to make it digestible. Mm-hmm. So that's how I ended up breaking it up into the chapters I did. So I said, okay, I'm going to do a chapter about the trials. So I took, all my files that I had researched, my notes, and I sat down and I just really brainstormed on what is the most important information to convey, say, on the trials or on the hanging, things like that. So that, because there's so much information to condense, that was really the hardest part, was distilling it down to an enjoyable book that still conveyed the historical accuracy.
And it's funny because, I shouldn't say funny, but it's interesting because you break down the suspects, not only the victim, but the suspects in the book very, very well, like chapter 1. So we get a good handle of who the players are. And, of course, Richard Jennings, he was a man in his 70s.
Yeah.
And he was killed mainly, if I'm not mistaken here, by reading over land. It was a land dispute.
Yeah, 50 acres, and I'm going to actually be revising the book, because since the publication, I've been able to actually uncover the actual will that was filed with the county clerk. So I actually have the will. It was all over 50 acres of land.
Wow.
And greed, really.
Yeah, I mean, but at the time, I want to say that, just to addendum to that whole thing, James Teed, he was living on the property at the time, was he not?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So maybe that was more, that was all of his 50 acres. That was everything he had in life.
Yeah, that's what it boiled down to. He was about to lose everything and really had nothing else to lose, I guess, when you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and my question is, and it's kind of a silly one, because I don't think you say it, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it kind of feels like that almost the whole time that Jack Hodges, who actually did the murder, was he set up? I mean, because it seems like as soon as the inquiries happened, everyone was kind of pointing towards Jack Hodges. It's like even the people who put through, like, we're trying to get him to murder Richard Jennings. You are the guy, like, immediately, like, yeah, that's the guy you want to talk to. He's the one that did it.
Yeah, I keep thinking of it from a police point of view, and he's like the worst person that you would want to do this murder, because he's a drunkard.
Yep.
And when he gets drunk, he talks. But yet he's also the type, he's supposed to have been ill-tempered, full of vices, and that's what the newspapers describe him as.
Sure.
So, if you're looking to have someone commit a murder, I guess he's, on the other hand, the person who you want to do this.
Now, let me take us back to 200 years ago. Jack Hodges was an African American sailor, am I correct?
Yes.
And so now in those days, race relations were not what they are today. In fact, as far as I know, the Emancipation Proclamation hasn't gone through at this point.
Right.
So why not an African American, knowing that no one would believe what he says anyway?
And I think in reading a lot of the stuff, that's sort of how I've been looking at it, that they figured, well, even if he sort of rats us out, they're not going to believe him because, like you pointed out, the racial attitudes were very different. So who was going to take his word over a white person's word?
Not only a white person, but a landowner. And back then, that was huge.
Right.
So, and two, I mean, I guess the idea of money kind of hits me a little bit because even though it wasn't confirmed, at least $500 was paid to Jack Hodges to carry out the murder, even though I think it was said that it was up to $1,000, which in 1818 would be a great sum of money. So if this land being taken away from James Teed was going to be a lot, I mean, what kind of money are we talking about here? Because as it was, to kill off Richard Jennings for $1,000 is a huge amount of money.
Yeah, and the thing with the $1,000, I've never been able to 100% feel that was an accurate number from the day.
So, Mike, you're saying Jack didn't leave a receipt laying around saying, give him $1,000 to kill Richard Jennings?
And Jack has, Jack's story's changed a little bit, and over the course of the years, which I sort of touch on in the book, and even in his later years after he gets out of prison, his story changes again. So I have some concerns about Mr. Hodges.
Yeah, like what?
I'm not sure that he was 100% honest in his testimony.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, he certainly carried out the deed. I think that that's very accurate. But I think his implication of the other people involved might have been exaggerated. And he was definitely promised a pardon. I think that the record, even though he claims he wasn't, his lawyers claim he wasn't, there's a letter that's in the book where basically the judge, right after he's convicted and sentenced to die, writes to the governor and says, this guy ought to be pardoned. Mm-hmm. After everybody's sworn up and down that no one's ever said this, and it's because of his testimony. That's why he was offered this pardon.
Well, 200 years, Mike, though, 200 years ago, what was police work like? I mean, we didn't have fingerprints. We didn't have forensics back then. How would they have gotten to the bottom of a murder like this, other than through eyewitness testimony?
Well, that's really all they had. They had their interviews. They interviewed the suspects, and really a lot of it went down to the credibility of the people testifying. So a lot of the credibility goes back to Jack Hodges. And they gave him a lot of credibility, so if they thought that having a black man do this would be, his story wouldn't be credible, they had the opposite effect. He actually had more credibility than the white landowners.
And it's very interesting, and I really appreciate that in the book that you point out kind of the perspective of what it was like back in 1818 when the manhunt was carried out to try to find Jack Hodges, because I think a lot of us, I certainly am speaking for myself, take for granted all the tools that are available, even before computers and anything else, that didn't exist back in 1818 to try to track him down.
Yeah, that just, the whole manhunt fascinates me still. Today, if we want to find somebody, we have, photographs, we have the internet, we can be sending a message to police departments all over the state, let alone the country.
Yeah.
They didn't even have that. They had no pictures.
Yeah.
They basically just had intuition, instincts, and following the trail. Just a really good old-fashioned manhunt.
Well, it's funny, Mike. I hear a lot of dumb criminal stories where they get caught by using Facebook by checking in where they are. We're over here at Dunkin' Donuts, and it's like, really?
Oh, absolutely.
You're wanted by the police, and you're going to check in at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, absolutely. So they didn't have that luxury back in 1819, 1818.
Do you think that if Richard Jennings was killed with the one shot and not a botch shot, do you think that the outcome would have been any different?
I think it might have. I think one shot that would have, killed him almost instantly. Maybe Jack Hodges would have been a little less concerned, having had to beat him to death. It's hard to say, though, because, again, the whole issue boils down to the minute the murder's uncovered, that's when it becomes this big news. Because murder was pretty rare.
Yeah. And it was New York's very first murder for hire, so not only are we taking a rudimentary police force, but we're also giving them a whole new crime to investigate that they have no tools to do at all.
Right, exactly. So very sensational. It would be sensational today, let alone back, 200 years ago.
Richard Jennings himself, is he... I mean, no one should ever be murdered, obviously. But the thing is, was he free from? I mean, was he an okay guy, or did he help stir the pot in all this?
Oh, he definitely stirred the pot. Not that he deserved to be murdered, but even the accounts of the day have nothing really nice to say about Richard Jennings, and he's the victim. So he was miserly. He was engaged in this ongoing dispute with his own nephew. This is his nephew, James Teed.
Yeah.
He stirred the pot, and I think he enjoyed stirring the pot.
Reading this, I was kind of surprised that Jennings just didn't say to James, hey, it's family property, your family, you can have it.
Yeah, and really what it boils down to it was James' property to begin with.
Yeah.
And for Richard Jennings to somehow have interjected himself to get this land, he really instigated the entire incident.
So what is the deal with the land? Because, I read about that and read that, James Teed was using the land. I mean, and like you said, it was going to be ruined once the land went over to Richard Jennings, in 1819. What is the whole deal with the land?
Well, essentially, James's father, the book, it's mentioned his name was James, too. I recently found out that it was Jacobus. But he had encumbered a lot of debts, and James had worked very hard to pay off his father's debts. And when his father died, he left his property to his wife with a clause that 50 acres would be set aside for James. However, James would have to wait for his mom to die to get that land.
Gotcha.
So essentially, James Teed himself runs up some debt and tells his mom, listen, I need to get a hold of this property to get myself out of debt. And his mom says, sure, I'll sign it over to you. And that's where Richard Jennings, his uncle, intervenes and manages to get the entire Teed estate signed over to him. And that's what starts this nasty ball rolling.
Well, how long was the court battle? I mean, how drug out was this thing?
Oh, it was several years. We're talking probably 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
But this is going on back and forth. I think in the book I mentioned that they would purchase debts. So if Richard Jennings owed, Joe the blacksmith $2, James Teed would pay $5 for that debt just so that he could demand payment from Richard Jennings. And if Richard Jennings didn't pay back then, you would go to debtor's jail. They'd put you in jail. So they would enjoy having each other arrested over debts that they would buy at more than face value.
Man, sure, I'm glad caller IDs are on today.
Yeah, exactly.
I am picking that one up.
No.
So, being a little thick that I am, in terms of understanding things, what was it that allowed the courts to decide to give the land to Richard Jennings then? What was it that they're like, oh yeah, this belongs to you?
That's one of those holes in the story that I've never been able to really adequately fill in. The accounts of the time really don't mention what the basis was. I've had no luck finding any of the circuit court records from the time period. So that's really one of those big questions. What did they use to base their ultimate decision on? That one I really don't have a good answer for yet.
Sure.
Is that common, though, Mike, when you go back 200 years to find lost files in courthouses and things just not completely intact?
Yeah, the further back the cases go, the much more difficult, finding any types of records are.
Are you surprised by how much you were able to find? I mean, because there's a lot of information here.
Yes, I was, and fortunately, at the time period, things like murders and capital trials were big news, so that you could find where transcripts would be made and then sold to the public. And fortunately, they did that because that's really the only thing that survives is the transcripts that were taken and then later sold as a book. Without that, we'd have even nothing of the court to survive.
Yeah, because I'm even looking back 100 years in some cases, you go, oh my Lord, there's nothing left. I mean, come on, it's only 100 years ago, but still 100 years is a long time when they're doing how many cases a year going through that courthouse?
Yes.
So it's not uncommon, and I found that out firsthand to lose track of that kind of thing, and that's where a really good historical society comes into play. One that really has kept everything. I noticed that as well. If you can get a good historical society in that area, they're worth their weight in gold.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's that picture of what they believe is where the murder had taken place, and that was from the Chester Historical Society. Do you get a lot of information from them?
Yeah, they were a great help, and the fact that they even had some of those photos, I believe they were from the 50s they were taken.
Oh, okay.
That someone actually had taken the time and done a lot of research. And a lot of that research is where some of the legends came from. And I think I kind of explored that in the book a lot. But just to have anything that I could put my hands on that had been documented previously was a help.
Well, to be honest with you, Mike, I'm like, I know Mike really well, but every guest I go fact check to make sure they're on the money. And so I do my internet search, I do my due diligence. Like I was saying, I could find very little on this case, period. Very little. Yeah. Everything I found mainly was, put out by you for the book. But as far as actual transcripts or really any first-hand accounts, anything, there was nothing. It was really, I really came to a dead end. I couldn't imagine writing a book, doing all the research and trying to get all the facts right, because in true crime, especially in true crime, as you know, that's what really matters, is having the facts absolutely correct. How hard did you find that through your writing process?
That was really the hardest part, was making sure that I had everything I needed. Because when I told the story, and that's why the book is very thoroughly endnoted, anything that I asserted as being a fact, I wanted to have it backed up by a source. Mm-hmm. So, it might be hard to get those sources. Like, it took me, 3 or 4 years of a lot of digging to find them and copies of them, but they're out there. And, if I said this is why this occurred or why I believe it occurred, there's some type of a supporting document that had led me to make that conclusion. And I wanted to make sure that readers could see that trail of evidence.
So on the other side of it, what was your aha moment? Like, what was the thing that you uncovered that you're like, this is brilliant?
There was a couple, not to pat myself on the back.
No, please do. I mean, this is awesome.
I think one of them was the big story that really fascinated me from the beginning was the story that after the hanging, the men weren't allowed to be buried in any cemeteries.
Mm.
Really?
That was the story, and that at night, they were finally someone allowed them buried outside the walls of their cemetery. And at night, a group of men came and drove locust stakes into their graves.
Which, now, what is a locust stake?
It's basically just a long stake of wood, which, based upon superstitions of the day, people had a lot of weird ideas of what would happen to people that were hanged, especially if you were buried in unconsecrated soil, that you could basically come back.
Yeah, they're become vampires. We must stake them down.
Right. So, in 1819, that's not that long ago in the big picture. We were very superstitious. But that legend to me always struck me as very okay, it probably didn't happen this way, but there's got to be some level of truth.
Yeah.
The cemetery was identified. The cemetery's still there. I made a couple visits. I didn't find any evidence of locust stakes sticking out of the ground. Obviously, I wouldn't. But I could find no record of them being buried there. But I did have a couple of those aha moments where I was able to identify James Teed's family members being buried there in later years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also found a story where the one man that was hanged, they did exhume his body after his hanging a few days, because there had been rumors that he'd been seen walking around.
Oh, yeah, that would make a lot of people a little jittery.
Yeah, and I guess they did try some galvanic experiments on him to bring him back, which didn't work.
Thank God.
So they did dig his body up, and they found it to be quite in the same position that it was in. So I was able to piece together what I think is how just a really mundane, one of the guys, it's even mentioned he was buried by his children. over the years it grew into a mishmash of legend into this crazy story when really it's just the truth is not so spectacular.
Yeah. Just one really quick question. Are there any more Teed family members still living in that area?
I haven't been able to identify any in the area, but I have had extended family members from other areas contact me. And so it's pretty interesting. And
not everybody who was convicted in the case was hanged, right?
Right, that's correct.
Well, who spared them? Who got off? I mean, who was spared?
Well, they sentenced, of the 5 defendants, 4 were convicted at trial and sentenced to death, which was the only sentence available.
Yeah.
The 5th was the female. They allowed her to plead guilty. She was pregnant at the time. They allowed her to plead guilty to a accessory charge, which did not carry the death penalty. So
was that Hannah Teed? Was that Hannah Teed?
That was Hannah Teed,
okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was spared. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, she was spared. And I think a lot of it was she was a mother. They had a lot of children. And I think the powers that be at the time just, they knew they were going to hang 4 men. I don't think they wanted to hang a woman, too.
Would have been some bad PR going on for that town.
Yeah. I think at that point it's like, listen, we've already going to probably hang, 4 people. Do we really want to have a woman being hanged? But, after the... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but all 4 men were hanged?
No, what they did was, after the sentencing, the judge had recommended to the legislature that Jack Hodges be pardoned because of his testimony. And that does happen, but they also, for some reason, throw in the other gentleman into there. So that you have David Conkling, that's the other defendant that was pardoned.
Mm-hmm.
His name gets thrown in. James Teed's name actually gets taken in and out a couple times by the legislature. But ends up being taken out so that him and David Dunning do go to the gallows, and Conkling and Hodges do get their sentences pardoned, but do end up having it commuted to prison rather than just being let out.
Wow.
Okay.
But James Teed, he got hung, and
yes.
He was hanged by the neck dead. So they buried him outside the walls of the cemetery, and to fulfill their own superstition, they took locust post and they put it through his grave. Wow.
At least that's what the rumor was.
Yeah. Well, poor guy, just laying there trying to do your thing, and then next thing you know, we think you're a vampire. Oh, I'll take that. But that is definitely a strange twist right there.
Well, and even the guy who actually committed the act was pardoned.
Yes. Yep.
What?
Yeah.
Well,
Jack Hodges, who was certainly the most culpable.
He turned state's evidence, though, didn't he?
Yes, and that was pretty standard at the time, that if you testified against your co-defendants and secured convictions, you would be spared.
So
that was pretty common.
He had an ulterior motive in this. It wasn't just to be a good citizen. It was to save his own neck, literally.
Oh, yeah, he definitely had a very good reason to lie and to implicate other people.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. We have 1 minute before break, and I got to tell you, this story just keeps getting better and better and better, but we still have a lot more ground to cover, Greg. I mean, it gets really twisted as we go as well. So I don't want to give it away too much, but we come back, though, after break. I would like to get into basically how the murder was conspired, how they got this guy to want to kill him, all those things. We'll come back. Don't go anywhere. More Michael J. Worden with us. We're going to talk about the murder of Richard Jennings, New York's first murder for hire case. You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At ACE, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come. even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at Ace, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. Ace,
The helpful place.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
You're listening to After Hours AM Deeper Cuts.
Cutting deep into what skews you.
And this is Hour 2 of After Hours AM Deeper Cuts. My name is Greg Bakken. I am with Joel Sturgis, and tonight we are talking with Michael J. Worden, who is a police sergeant and author who has redefined the genre of true crime with his new book, The Murder of Richard Jennings, by delving into the case with a unique, fresh approach. He began researching the several true historical crimes in the fall of 2009 and has demonstrated an almost obsessive need to obtain information. And Michael, I got to ask, what does that mean in terms of having that obsessive need to obtain information?
Well, it's, when I learn that there's a source out there that I can't necessarily get easily, it becomes an obsession to get that. And I can't tell you how many poor, librarians or, archivists that I hassled by email and on, phone calls to get documents, released to me that, they wouldn't circulate. And, fortunately, I really had a lot of great people who would scan things and email me just the sections I needed off of old books. So I really lucked out because I didn't want to leave a stone unturned. If there was something with information in it, I wanted to know it. I wanted to see what it was. Even if it was duplicate, at least I wanted to put my eyes on it, read it myself, and determine whether or not it was useful or just something that can be sort of filed away because it supports everything else that I have.
Gotcha.
Well,
that makes total sense. And, look at this case, and as a first murder for hire, take us through the dominoes that fell after the court case. James Teed has decided he wants Richard Jennings dead. Who does he contact first to get the ball rolling?
Well, he really has this hired hand who's Jack Hodges. He sort of applies him with alcohol because he's a drunk.
Sure.
And one of the Teeds, they made whiskey, I believe it was, because that's what a lot of people did back then.
Mm-hmm.
And they, they conspire. Listen, we have to kill this man. We want you to shoot him with a musket.
With a musket of all things.
Yeah, that's all they had, I guess. So
you have to stand really close, but you'll get him.
I mean, really, you got to be almost on top of the person to
literally, yeah.
So that's really this. Basically, they get him to agree to do it, and then they just keep pumping him with, the time's going to come, and it sort of happens very quickly. The day that it does happen, it really wasn't planned for that day. It just happened to be that the stars all lined up for the conspirators, and that's why they did it the day they did.
And Jack, he didn't really want to do it, did he?
From his testimony, he's the reluctant, I really didn't want to, but I wanted to, do what my employers wanted me to, and I was drunk. So,
sure, I ran into...
He had nothing really to gain by killing him.
Well, sure, I ran into Richard. I happened to have the musket. We were out in the field. Why not? I said to myself, here's a quick $1,000. But did he actually shoot him with the musket, or did did the musket do the dirty work?
Well, according to what happened, he shoots him and it strikes him to the side of the head, takes off his ear, and knocks him to the ground, but doesn't kill him.
Oh, that's
now
pleasant.
There's conflicting reports what happens after that. According to Jack Hodges, he froze, and David Dunning, who was with him, took the rifle and proceeded to beat him in the head with the butt of the rifle. David Dunning says, not so fast, Jack Hodges. I was there, but you beat him with the rifle after you failed to kill him by shooting him.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, that's what killed him, is this repeated blows to the head.
But even after they left him, he wasn't dead, at least right away.
No, because when they did find the body, he had crawled from the spot where he was attacked. It was found, I forget the exact distance off the top of my head, 15 to 20 feet, say, away from there. So he managed to even crawl. I mean, this was like a hard guy to kill.
Yeah, hardest guy since, probably the monk. What was his name again that they tried to kill in Russia?
Rasputin.
Exactly. Yeah. Rasputin probably going, man, you took a lot of crap before you died.
Yeah, so this was a tough old guy.
And Richard Jennings was what, 77, did we say?
Yeah, he was in his 70s.
Which even back in the 1800s, that's a good age.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was way beyond life expectancy. I mean, this guy was like a fossil in that time, day and time. So, okay, Hodges shoots at him, takes his ear off. According to Hodges, David Dunning grabs the rifle, starts beating him about the head. Richard Jennings, that is, starts beating Richard Jennings. And then David says, well, hold on there, Hodges. Let's not get too excited here. Why did they believe Hodges over Dunning?
And what I find interesting, number one, they took Hodges' word over all of them, despite really, David Dunning had zero motive to want to kill Richard Jennings. In fact, he had spoke to Jennings not too long before that, and Jennings said, I got no problem with you, and I'm going to let you stay on and live in the house and work the fields there. So really, what does he gain by killing him?
Yeah, I wouldn't have made him suspect. He wouldn't have been my Kaiser Sose. I wouldn't have thought
this is where those big question marks still linger and can't be answered really easily.
So, in a bizarre story, which is what this is, how does Attorney General Martin Van Buren play into all this?
Well, Martin Van Buren was the New York State Attorney General, and as was common at the time, he came down to assist the prosecutors with the capital cases, which apparently the Attorney General would do when there was capital cases. So, in New Orange County would have had 5 potential capital cases at this time. So he definitely would have wanted to come down and get that ball rolling with them.
Gotcha. He wanted to oversee it, is what he wanted to do, make sure it was done right, and because it was so sensational at the time, I would imagine, and so odd to have this make capital cases all at once. Now, what does David Conkling, what does he play into this?
Well, David Conkling is Hannah Teed's brother, so there's a lot of family connections.
Gotcha. Okay.
And he just gets sucked in because him and James Teed are close, and he sort of gets sucked into the feud. Where at one point, James Teed, and this is very unclear because there's not a lot of evidence behind it, tries to convey the property to Conkling, which then draws Conkling into this battle between Richard Jennings and Teed. Now it involves Conkling as well.
Okay.
So it's really a 3-way mess at this point.
Well, that's pretty tough to unravel, that mess.
Yeah, you need a chart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, that, while reading the book, and like I kind of mentioned earlier about how you're going through the book, and it's a difficult read, not because it's difficult, but because there's so much information. And I just am so impressed by the level of detail and the layers of detail that this story just keeps giving us.
Oh, thank you. And that's what I was going for.
Yeah, do they kind of show up and say, well, we really can't unravel this, so James, David, and David, you guys are going to reach the gallows. Jack, we like you. You're free to go. Hannah, you're a little prego over there. We can't be killing you off because that would be a PR poo. So is that kind of how, instead of trying to unravel it all, they're like, screw it, we'll kill them all.
Yeah, I think at the end they took their statements and they put it to a jury, which is how a lot of this stuff would have been sorted out back then when you didn't have law enforcement like we have today to investigate it. essentially it was, listen, we put it on trial and let a jury of your peers kind of come to a conclusion.
So how was this trial kind of like one of the first like big, am I going out of bounds by saying circus trial, or is it just sensational?
It was definitely sensational. I think circus atmosphere might be appropriate because, the newspapers talk about how the crowds were spilling into the street to try to catch glimpses of the trial because they couldn't fit in the courtroom. And, before unions, these were trials that went on all day and into the night. They didn't just, they didn't work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They sometimes started at 9 o'clock in the morning and went till 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, that's a grueling day. And just to put some perspective for some people who are just tuning in, number one, this is a great book. We're talking about Michael Worden. And he wrote this fantastic case study. It's more of a case study than just a book. I mean, it really dives into this. The Murder of Richard Jennings, the true story of New York's first murder for hire. Now, that being said, would you put that, just to make it contemporary for everyone, like the O.J. Simpson trial? Was it that to that level? Was it up there like O.J.?
I would say yes for 18 and 19 during the trials because, I was finding references of this trial all over the United States at the time. So, for it to be published in newspapers all over the country, this insignificant little event in Orange County, New York, in the big picture of things, is being reported on all over the country. People are following this.
It was one of the two things, Mike. They were either really bored and no news to report, or they really thought this was a big deal. One of those two things happened with the AP.
It was definitely big news to them. This was sensational. So.
And I gotta ask, because of it being so sensational and there's a lot of public opinion on it, do you think that had any bearing on the outcome of the trial?
Oh, I definitely. Because I think a lot of the jurors had a preconception of what happened based upon the news reports. So I think they went into that, and there was a lot of testimony. But I still think that, these were all Orange County jurors. They had known the story. They'd read about it. It was in the news. So I'm sure that they had formed a lot of opinions ahead of time.
Yeah, I was going to say impartial jury may not have come into play during this case.
Yeah.
Everyone knowing about it. And of course, now we're talking 200 years ago. Reading and writing was not necessarily, something that was of value at that time. Most people didn't read or write at that point. And we're sitting here in front of a computer screen with Mike, of course, who laid it out for us. So we were able to follow it. I couldn't imagine being a juror of the day trying to sort all this out firsthand.
Exactly. And I think that's a lot of it. And, add on to that, 15-hour court days, listening to nonstop testimony.
Well, and to your point, Joel, about the writing and stuff, even I'm looking in the book from David Conkling writing about Jack, which once again, it's so much information. It's trying to keep it all straight. He gave him, $10? And then he writes a note to James Adair about trying to basically get Jack a job, which once again, it's a very well written note, and very very much to the point and helpful actually.
Yes, and some of the players were from much better families.
Okay.
The Conklings, his family was quite a well-known family in the area. His wife's family was of the Knight family in Orange County. Another well-to-do family. So these weren't necessarily they probably had some level of basic education where they could read.
I am surprised, though, being from a prominent family, that they would reach the gallows. That was not par for the course back then. If you were from a prominent family, a lot of, let's just say, things weren't as above board as they are today in the legal system.
Well, that's why a lot of the speculation was that David Conkling was spared, was because he was from a pretty good politically, well-known family in Orange County. In the book I talk about, the rumor was it was a Masonic conspiracy because he was a Mason, and they spared him because of that.
He's a good guy.
That was not true.
We gotta kill him as a Mason. How bad that look?
And I think some of it might have been too that they looked at it like, listen, we can't just spare Jack Hodges because it's going to look like he was given a promise. He was still an African American in 1819. So I sometimes wonder if they threw somebody else in just to sort of balance it out.
Sure. And the idea, obviously, Richard Jennings aside, let's take him out of the equation. Who fared the worse out of this case that maybe shouldn't have?
I think David Dunning, the second man to hang.
Yeah, because he had no connection. He had no real connection to Jennings. And he actually liked Jennings, didn't he?
Yes, he had no connection. His name never even gets brought up once to spare him after the sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not really sure if he was even culpable, if he even did anything to conspire.
Yeah.
So, you know, I sometimes think he probably got the raw deal out of everybody. Even Richard Jennings, because he really was an unconnected party. So I have concerns that an innocent man might have been hanged on that day.
Well, back in those days, I have heard, doing a lot of true crime radio, of course, on Wednesday night with Dr. Clarissa Cole, Eric Olson, and that is, of course, After Hours AM, the criminal code. But we have heard that time and time again, and we're talking way back cases. It wasn't unheard of for the wrong guy to get face the gallows or just wrong identification altogether.
Yeah,
it was not unheard of.
Definitely.
Was there any long-lasting effects that came from this trial and the outcome from the trial?
It had a negative impact on the families. Obviously, the Teed family. Hannah Teed doesn't really do a lot of jail time, but her life is miserable afterwards. She's has a bunch of kids. She ends up committing suicide in the early 1820s.
Oh, goodness.
And her children end up being farmed out to other family members, which I recently found all those papers from the surrogates court. So they're raised by family, and they end up doing quite well for themselves. But, you can imagine the Dunnings, not a lot's written about them, but they weren't a well-known family. He had a wife and child, didn't have a lot of money. So no one knows, what really happened to his family after all this.
Yeah, they're kind of lost to history because I'm sure that they either A, moved, or B, they weren't important enough to keep an eye on.
Right, and I think that's what it was. They weren't important.
Yeah. And that's really sad, and especially if the wrong man was brought to death. You would think that there would be some, and we'll talk about this in the next half hour, some paranormal stuff going on with people that are wrongfully convicted. Things like that, and but really looking at the thing as a whole, very, very odd case, very, very confusing unless you read the book. Of course, you could pick up Mike's book over at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, really anywhere. Pick it up, The Murder of Richard Jennings, the true story of New York's first murder for hire. You're going to want to pick that up because we can barely touch on it in this hour-and-a-half interview. Because, boy, it takes more twists and turns than a Quentin Tarantino movie. I'm telling you, it's everywhere on the board. So you definitely don't want to do that. But getting back to the story, into it, and then being put to death, who was the judge sitting on that on the bench at the time that ordered these deaths?
The judge was a Judge Van Ness. He actually was a judge out of New York City that came up to preside over the trials.
Kind of like a circuit judge.
Yeah, he was actually a very well-known jurist. Very professional, very competent, very compassionate. And at the time, he really had no choice because the law only prescribed death by hanging. There was no option for the judge.
There was no mandatory minimums or any leeway in there. It was death or nothing.
Now, a lot of times when you hear people say about, like even in the Old West, the hanging judges, when a lot of the times the law only prescribed one sentence for certain crimes, and that would have been death by hanging, where the judge couldn't stray from that.
Gosh, that's just incredible. I mean, to be to be the judge over something like that. I mean, did he have any idea of kind of what he was getting into in terms of how detailed and bizarre this case was?
I was never able to find anything about him that he wrote, but I think that's why he was brought in, because he'd presided over capital trials before.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew that this was something he could handle, even if there were so many of them. They weren't all tried at once. They were tried in succession.
Okay.
But I think they knew that this was a competent jurist who we can rely upon to preside over these trials. They're going to be done correctly. They're going to be done orderly. And, he's going to make the right conclusions of law during those trials.
Well, Mike, I was kind of curious. Was there no court reporters back in those days? Because I thought for sure there would have been some record, at least in the court reporter, the minutes of the trials.
I don't know if they had them or not back then. I've never been able to find anything that says there was an official record kept. So, there must have been some court clerk who documented certain things, but they probably didn't keep very accurate details.
I'm talking about the angry lady in the corner feverishly typing, doing the shorthand. You know what I'm talking about.
They're usually the ones that have to slow me down when I'm testifying.
Be quiet, Mike. Fast. Come on, slow down. You say that again. Come on.
Yeah.
No, I knew a court reporter one time, and she goes, "Oh, man, it is not as cool as it looks." Because I thought the typewriter was kind of cool.
But it doesn't look cool at all. There's no letters on the keys. I don't know how on earth you could do it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm always impressed because they do it.
Yeah, somehow, some way. But, back in those days, again, we're talking about the judge and we're talking about the players here. Richard Jennings, though, the victim, he was, like we're saying, was not the nicest or most well-liked guy. I was surprised he had to turn to someone like a Jack Hodges to do the deed when there probably would have been a ton that would have said, yeah, I'll do that job. Not a problem. I don't like the guy anyway.
Yeah, I think that there probably would have been a few other people willing, but I think the entire deterrent really was that the death sentence.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Really
then there's that.
Back then.
Yeah.
Well, it always surprised me when I was reading the book that, and maybe because Jennings didn't have a lot of friends, but it would have seemed to me that it was a pretty straightforward idea that James Teed would have been involved in any kind of murder that would have happened to Jennings because of what was going on.
Yeah, and I think that was, and I think what happened was once everybody in the community kind of knew that this was a murder, they kind of all assumed that, James Teed's going to be involved. Mm-hmm. In some way, or, even if he didn't kill the man, he's involved.
But how stupid, though. When you think about it, you just got done with a big land dispute with Jennings, okay, if you're Teed. And you go ahead and you hire Jack Hodges, which is a drunkard, by all accounts, to do the deed. Are you expecting no one to put that puzzle together going, well, are you sure Teed didn't have anything to do with this? I mean, come on.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, and to be fair to James Teed, he denies ever hiring Jack.
Well, of course he would.
This.
Of course he would.
He says, I wished him dead, and Jack might have took it upon himself to do that, but I would never tell Jack to kill him.
Oh, come!
I love it. I love it. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's up to him if he wants to kill him. I didn't say it.
Oh, okay, Mike. You're coming into this 2017. Let's just say you're called on a case like this. What's the first thing you do as an investigator to get to the bottom of it?
Oof, this is a rough one. I mean, nowadays we would have, number one, we'd have the crime scene, which would give us an opportunity to really collect evidence. The gun parts left behind. Mm-hmm. We would have a much better opportunity to maybe collect. Right. So we might be able to get some type of forensic evidence, fingerprints, DNA. And then, but a lot of it's going to boil down to good old-fashioned interviews and talking to people. Mm-hmm. And really breaking down those eyewitness statements. What did Jack Hodges see and what did he say? What did David Dunning say? All of them.
It's an interesting question. When I read the book, that's the one question I did have in mind was the whole idea of how much after they found Jennings' body, because it wasn't police that found it, it was people who took it upon themselves, citizens, to go look for him, how much of the crime scene was compromised because people like, oh, I found pieces of the gun, I found the lock, I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to do whatever I want with it.
Yeah, that's how they would have done it. They would have just picked the pieces up. They would have brought the body to wherever they were going to bring it to have the coroner conduct his inquest over the body. Yeah, that's how they would have. That would have been their level of investigation.
Well, but then again, even investigators back then had their BS detectors. I mean,
absolutely.
You just know when someone's lying to you, Mike. I'm sure you go on a case and you're talking with suspect A. And they're just oozing guilt, and it's just like a big neon sign. And how I would imagine that's the norm. Rather, that's more the rule than the exception to the rule. Most people are guilty; they don't wear that well at all.
No, that's true. Most people are, when they are guilty, and you can usually tell that they do exhibit signs.
No, it's incredible. I mean, every aspect of this case, I mean, is absolutely incredible. And the idea that how far they were able to get pieces and details of this case back in 1818 actually really floors me quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's a circumstantial case. There's no direct evidence.
Yeah, you're
really.
right.
It's all circumstantial that they were able to put this together, bring it to trial, and actually sustain convictions.
Which is pretty amazing. Either that or they had horrible attorneys. One of the two went on here.
Well, I mean, from what I can find out, their attorneys were pretty good, for the day.
Yeah.
They were well-known attorneys in the county and in New York. So who knows, I mean, I just think at that point you're up against this big prosecution. You have the Attorney General, Martin Van Buren. He's a celebrity of the day, if you can have a celebrity.
Yeah.
He's larger than life, and he's in Orange County.
Yeah, he's coming to that
prosecuting
county.
a case.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it must have been just a spectacle. Now take us, though, to the crowd when the hanging happened. How big was that crowd?
The crowd was estimated to be up to 20,000 people.
Oh, my God, that's a lot of people.
Which for 1819 would have been about the population of Orange County, New York.
Yeah, so everybody.
Was about 20,000. They showed up beginning the night before.
Wow.
So
they pitched tents.
A lot of people. They had to move the hanging from the town square to about a mile outside of town to like this natural amphitheater area to accommodate the crowds.
You find a tent city like they're waiting for the Guns N' Roses concert. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's exactly.
It's so macabre, isn't it? I mean, the idea that being a spectator of a hanging and stuff, but that was very much a way. I mean, I guess actually, let me back up because I would assume in that area a hanging was probably fairly rare.
Yes, the only other time before this case there had been a hanging in Orange County, New York, was when Claudius Smith. He was a notorious. They called him the Pirate of the Ramapos or the Cowboy of the Ramapos. He was a loyalist to the British Crown and a terrorist. He would go around with his gang and, kill people and steal things. And he was hanged in Orange County.
Wow.
And that was at the end of the Revolution.
He sounds like an all-around nice guy there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of – one of the legends about him, not to get sidetracked, is he was buried near the gallows. And then when they were building the new courthouse, they accidentally excavated his body up and they put his skull in the wall of the courthouse. So – And some of the legends about him got mixed into the hanging of Teed and Dunning.
Mike, you got to go ahead, go to that courthouse and rip that wall down, see if that skull's still in there.
Well, I'd like to. It's actually it's now where now they're actually using it as a courtroom temporarily, the upstairs. But that's where the Historical Society is now. It's the old original 1840 courthouse. So I'd be curious to see if it's in there.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? You rip it. Oh,
yeah,
his head is in there. Okay, let's patch this back up. I don't want anything to do with that.
I was gonna say, then what? Then what do you do? You open it up. Then what do you do?
Well, exactly. You may not want to grab his head because next thing you know, he's coming home to you, and you can't get rid of him. He won't pay rent.
No. Add to your collection of skulls.
No, put it right on your dresser in your bedroom. And just have it looking down on you and your wife going, yep, buddy, that's my prize right there.
She already threatens me that if I ever bring something home from a ghost hunt, she's going to kill me. So,
well, we got to run a break. We come back. We're going to switch gears, Mike. We're not going to let him get out of here without talking about paranormal because, my gosh, he has had quite the career there as well. Don't go anywhere. More Michael J. Worden. We come back right after this. After Hours AM will be right back after these messages.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If pop culture is to be believed, roughly 40% of all people are actually vampires. or dating one? Well, undead or not, you can always save on a clean, comfortable room at Motel 6, even if you sleep during the day because direct sunlight turns you into a pile of sparkly coffee grounds. Speaking of which, we have free coffee every morning. You day sleepers may want to go for the decaf. I'm Tom Bodette, and we'll leave the light on for you. Book online at motel6.com.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
Welcome back to After Hours AM. And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Greg Bach, and as soon as he's back in his studio, but, I wanted to finish a couple thoughts with Michael before we do move on to that paranormal realm. Why don't you give us some closure? Let's round out this conversation. Tell us the end. I mean, what really kind of rounds it out?
Well, what I did was, and my approach to all the other true crimes that I am working on, was to not just look at the crime itself. Yeah, that's all interesting to try to find the locations. But what happened to the players involved? In this case, there was all kinds of stories, that pardons were given, that names were changed on gravestones. So I wanted to find out, okay, Jack Hodges. What becomes of Jack Hodges in the years afterwards? Turns out he becomes a celebrity upstate New York. David Conkling. What happens when he gets out of prison?
Yeah.
What was his life like? Is he in? I actually found his grave, one of the few graves that I was able to actually locate from this case. Same thing with Jack Hodges. He actually has a big monument in his honor.
Wow.
Upstate. So,
Man.
I wanted to look at that whole picture.
Yeah.
Not just leave it as, okay, this is what happened in 1819. We're done with this story. It's, where does this story take us in the decades that followed?
So was it James Teed's tombstone that was changed with the date of his death? I'm trying to remember who it was.
David Conkling.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And of course, the allegation was that it was changed to reflect that he had died when he didn't die, which turns out that it didn't happen. It was just a really bad gravestone.
Oh, okay.
The way the engraving was, and I can see where somebody in the 1950s, when you visited that grave, would look at it and say, wow, that grave date is different.
Yeah, definitely. And, I got to let everyone know you can get The Murder of Richard Jennings, the true story of New York's first murder for hire in paperback right over here at Amazon. Right now it's, you can get the hardcover $24.17, paperback $17.84. Of course, it's available in Kindle. It's available in all those other platforms. You can go to Barnes & Noble. You can really go anywhere, but I'd definitely pick this book up if you're a big fan of true crime at all, or even history, to be honest. This is the book for you. It's unlike any other true crime book I've ever read. And lately that's saying something because, as you know, the Wednesday show, that is our true crime show. And this is the weirdest tale I've ever had to discuss on radio. So that's saying something. But, Mike, we cannot let you out of here without talking about the paranormal. I mean, you've done so much in the paranormal community. You've written some really great books. You've lectured to children about the paranormal. You've talked to people about it. Really, my question as we're talking, because I do know you so well from the paranormal, is how often does somebody that dies, right, being wrongfully convicted, do you ever notice their ghosts are a little more active than someone that was guilty? I mean, is it like they're coming to clear their name even from the afterlife?
I don't know what the exact statistic on that would be, but I would think that if you are wrongfully convicted, that it might be more reason to want to come back as a ghost.
Yeah.
Because you do have that unfinished, like, hey, this was wrong, and I want my name cleared. I couldn't save myself in life, but my good name is worth something still.
Yeah, I've heard of that before, and I know, Greg, you got a ton of questions on that end as well, because Greg, of course, he is really damn good with what they call the ghost box. This guy is phenomenal with it. Greg can communicate like no one's business on the other side of that box. So I just want to kind of finish my thinking is, if they want to come back and clear their name, do you find that they're more forceful than the normal ghosts then, or is it just the same? It's just what they're saying rather than how they're saying it.
I think anytime from my experience there's a spirit that really has a message, and it's important to them, even if we don't think it's important, if it's of the utmost importance to them that they have to come back to convey it, it's always going to be forceful. It's always going to be in your face, like, you have to hear this.
So you're on a crime scene, just doing your job, your day job. Do you ever run across, at the crime scene, you're not doing paranormal investigation, you are just there to do your job, are you running into paranormal stuff happening at the crime scene?
I've never had that happen, but I think largely it's because especially when I was working as a detective in the department, when you get to a crime scene, you just go into a game mode.
Sure.
Where it's just you focus on what has to be done, and you really block out all those external influences, whether it's other people, other external noises, and you go in there and you're like, okay, this is what my job is. I have to process this scene.
Yeah.
And you really don't. I think a lot of it's just you don't even think about it.
I suppose
they could be.
Yeah, you
don't really hear them.
You go in there and it's like you hear ball players say you're in the zone. So it must be very similar when you're called into a case and it's a murder case or what have you. You flip the switch to be in that zone, that mode, the detective mode, and those outside influences really aren't really a factor at that point.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And you have to really get in that zone and put your game face on, because you have to try to stop that natural reaction to feel bad and to, these are people involved. And if you allow your emotions to get the better of you, it becomes cloudy. You don't do your job effectively and as you're trained and expected to do.
Absolutely. So how do you investigate the paranormal? What do you like to do?
When we go out, we have our basic meters. We have different types of EMF meters, recorders. We have a couple of small handheld FLIR cameras now we've been using.
Nice.
And we go out, and what makes us different from a lot of other groups is we really go out and we try to document what we can document, but we're open to those personal experiences. Mm-hmm. I know some groups will say, well, if you can't record it, it's not evidence. Personal experiences aren't evidence. But my attitude, and my friend Linda, who investigates with me, her attitude is that's typically what brings people to call us is they hear things, they see things, they experience things. Why would we go in there not to hear things, see things, and experience things?
Yeah, it makes sense. And again, you wrote a great book. It's Ghost Detective. And originally we had you on the show to talk about that book. Oh, it must have been about, a year and a half, 2 years ago now already. Oh, my gosh, time sure does fly.
Ago, yeah.
And, of course, great book. And, of course, you can pick that up as well. And, Mike, you have a great website, which is just michaeljwarden.com, your name, and you can buy the books over at the website as well. But I just want to ask, I know a lot of police, and they're good friends of mine, and we support them whenever we can. But, to be honest with you, whenever I have a police officer get a hold of me, because a lot of them listen to this show in their cruisers late at night. They love the show, to listen to it. They'll be at that cemetery writing the reports, because evidently they love going to cemeteries to write a report because they don't get bothered or something. And that's when weird crap will happen. Have you ever had that cemetery moment where you're hanging around writing the report and next thing you know there's something weird going on?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest moments in my personal experiences was in a local cemetery at about maybe 5:30 in the morning. We were parked. We used to listen to Coast to Coast AM.
Well, that'll get you going.
And never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Terrible show. But we would from like 5 to 6 a.m. you could only get it out of like Atlanta, Georgia. And if you parked in one section of the cemetery, you could actually tune that in. So we would usually get coffee, listen to it. You'd write up whatever reports you had to write up before heading back. And parked outside in this area, we had something bang on the police car really loudly. And nothing was on the car. There was no trees above it. It had been a nice morning, so there was a nice layer of dew undisturbed. Nothing could explain why two police officers in a car heard something banging underneath the light bar, mind you, where you can't even put a hand.
Yeah.
It was a few years later, I had actually linked the location we were in was exactly next to a family plot, which was connected to my grandmother's house, which was highly haunted.
Interesting.
Found out that the people that were involved in that haunting were buried right next to the police car. So I think it was, hey, look over here, stupid. We're trying to get your attention.
Yeah. Sure. Come on, listen to us. Well, that and I never mess with two armed police officers. I'm just saying. I wouldn't be running around, doing that in the cemetery. But, yeah, very, very interesting. I would have, you know what, Greg? That would have been a pucker factor 10 moment for me.
It would have been. I do have to say, though, Michael, that I like the fact that you are including the stuff that the personal effects that are happening to you on an investigation. And with the group that I'm with, we always say we investigate with the heart. Because I think you have to have a heart to be able to investigate, to be able to understand those stories and be able to connect that with the evidence that you collect. That's just my personal opinion. I know a lot of groups don't always feel the way that we do on that kind of stuff, but I think it's, in my opinion, very important, and I'm very proud to hear that that's what you also do. So that's super cool.
Yeah, I like how you put that, investigate with the heart, because really when you get to the real source of what's causing some of these hauntings, they're very sad. They're very sad stories. Mm-hmm. These are human beings that are trapped, and it's sad. So I think having a heart's very important in that, going in with that approach.
Are you able to help move on spirits, or do you try to help spirits in any way?
Well, we, on investigations, we have done try to encourage them to move on. I don't know if it's worked. Some places we've gone back to and had continuing activity. Other places they don't invite us back because the activity got worse. So, in my grandmother's house, when we identified this one entity as being a judge who lost his child, we sort of sent him on his way because we thought he was there looking for his dead child, who had died when he was young. And I think he's gone, and I hope that we did encourage him to move on because, that's a very sad story. It's they're not pets. People like to talk about having ghosts, and I wish I had a ghost in my house. And a lot of people make money off of haunted locations, but they're not pets.
Yeah.
They're people.
No, they're there. And I know that Joel has some questions. I just want to quickly say, I was going to offer it out to you that if you don't have anyone to help you move spirits on and stuff, let us know, and we can help you close out your cases. And
definitely.
Also that we don't need to be there to do that. So if you need help, we can. I certainly know people who would be able to help and would want to help. Just throwing that out there.
Oh no, definitely. Add me on Facebook. So
I will absolutely. We could do clearings and all sorts of things because you and I and Joel and my friend Nicole, we're on the same page of wanting to help. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't let that story that I'm a nice guy get out there again, Greg. Come on now.
Who's this Greg you speak of?
Exactly. I don't know you anymore. No. But Mike, I was kind of thinking as we're talking, how much of your investigative training comes into paranormal investigation? I mean, do you utilize quite a bit of that?
Yeah, I think, and when I wrote the Ghost Detective book, investigating is really similar for whatever you're doing. It's taking good steps, documenting what you're doing, collecting evidence in the best manner possible that you can do it in, and drawing your conclusions based upon evidence. So whether it's at a crime scene, whether it's at a haunting where you're gathering evidence, it's no different. You're evaluating what's going on, you're talking to people, you're gathering evidence, you're evaluating that evidence, and then you're making conclusions based upon that. Mm-hmm. So very similar, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's all the who's, what's, where's, why's. Yeah, right. I mean, and that kind of stuff, and getting to the heart of the matter, why it's happening, and what was the catalyst of the activity.
Exactly. So I think investigating is really very similar no matter what you're investigating ultimately.
Do you do a lot of research into the locations that you're going into?
Yeah, it depends on what we're doing. In some cases when they're private homes, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because it's limited. We've done a couple of the bigger areas where we've done research. Sometimes it's research after the fact, which I kind of like because then you're not preconceiving it. So if you find out something happened afterwards and you're able to sort of link that to an experience,
Sure.
It's much better than knowing ahead of time where you might have maybe planted that information in your head.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Now, Mike, I got to ask you, do you do a lot of speaking engagements? Do you go to a lot of conferences? Where can people see you live if they want to?
I do a lot of local stuff. It depends. I have to update my website. So I have to add some new locations. But every year I do different speaking engagements. We do public ghost hunts at a mansion in Putnam County, New York, which is really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
We do it right around Halloween for 3 days as a fundraiser for them, and
Sure.
it's always a good time, and it's always different. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes the place is crazy.
Well, the reason why I throw that out there is we might be planning something down the road or something, and maybe, we'd love to have someone like Michael J. Worden come on down and spend some time with us and be able to really learn from somebody like yourself that has both. You have the practical knowledge of investigating, but yet you have the knowledge of paranormal investigating. There are two beautiful things.
Interested in that.
Yeah, two beautiful things that come together. I've always been fascinated by that.
Well, and the thing that I find interesting too, but you're talking in the same vein about taking your police background and applying it to paranormal stuff. Do you interview people, like if you're doing a private residence, you're interviewing them to kind of get a little background on what's going on, what their backstory is, what their life situation is, which is very important to the overall scene of things. And you listen to them and you're just like, you know what? You're full of BS. None of this is true. Do you run across that at all?
Yeah, it's rare because we tend to screen people really well beforehand before we even get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But, part of that is when you're talking to people is you're always going through your head. Are they being honest? Are they embellishing? Is there a reason they'd be lying?
Yeah.
So you're always going through to see what people's motivations are, if they're being honest. And fortunately, we really don't come across too many people that are dishonest.
Well, in the interest of a lot of our groups that are listening out there, we have a lot of paranormal, obviously, enthusiasts that love the show. What's your advice? I mean, you get that call from that crazy person, or they think they're crazy. I don't want to call them crazy person, but they're going, oh my God, I have this in my house. What steps do you take to ensure your own safety, that this person indeed is not a kook just waiting for their next victim, like some serial killer that's trying to get paranormal investigators in?
Well, it helps when you're investigating with a police officer who pretty much carries a handgun everywhere he goes on duty.
Yeah.
So that's just
God bless you, Mike. God bless you.
But I always carry. I've been threatened, and there's people that are doing a lot of time because of me. But it also keeps me safe from, I guess, anybody who could be a little questionable.
Well, sure, if they're flesh and blood, Smith & Wesson still works really, really well.
Yeah, I guess.
And it's also kind of that whole thing too of just being able to not only the BS factor of the people who are talking, but also people who, as Joel said, they might think that they're kind of crazy with what's going on. They don't want to tell you the whole truth because they don't want you to judge them for what's happening in their house. Do you run into that?
Yeah, definitely. They might not be giving you the whole story, or they're peppering it with, they're sort of modifying it to meet what they think you want to hear.
Yeah, I've run into that quite a bit over the years, where I'll talk to them one day and then maybe a month later I'll go, "What? Tell me that detail again about what happened." And then they add something new, like, "Well, then it chased me." Really? Are you just doing this because you're trying to ramp up the suspense, or are you? Yeah. I mean, it makes my red flags go up.
A lot of the initial Linda does a lot of talking to people and emailing ahead of time, and we tend to flesh out the ones that look like, you know what, this one doesn't feel right, or this doesn't sound right, and we're going to pass. We don't have the time to, and that's how we politely get out of it. We can't line our schedules up.
Yeah, send the B team in. Go, hey, we got one for you.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to do that because you also don't want to, your reputation in the field is everything.
Yep.
And you don't want to ruin that reputation and your credibility.
How many cases do you get? Do you get a lot of them coming through?
Yeah, it depends. Every year seems to be different. Sometimes we'll get a lot of calls. Sometimes we won't get as many. So it's always varies. It's usually when we give talks that people come up afterwards and say, listen, I'm here because you're going to think I'm crazy. And that's how you know that they're probably legit, is they always start out, listen, you're going to think I'm crazy, but... And then they start telling you what's going on, and you're like, well, no, you're probably not crazy.
Yeah.
I hear that's a lot.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's very personal connections.
Yeah, and that's it too. A lot of people say, "Well, you're gonna think I'm nuts." No, I've heard crazier. Trust me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this happened, in the middle of the night, and it scared the hell out of me. We ran out of the house screaming like our hair is on fire, and you're like, "Well, I've heard worse."
Oh yeah, definitely.
Definitely. It's not Gozer in there, okay? There's no gatekeeper, all right? So settle down, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's, a lot of it's very personal, and you can tell, you're meeting them face to face for the first time. So you're able to judge that credibility off the bat as they're initially telling the story.
Yeah.
So, we talked about the banging on the car and stuff, and, it wouldn't be complete without asking, what was your scariest moment with doing the paranormal investigating?
I would say one of the scariest was early on. It was in the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And towards the end of the night, I had wandered down one of the cell blocks, and all I had was the infrared camera to kind of light my way. And as I got to the end of the cell block, and it's shaped like a wagon wheel, so everybody's in the middle of the wagon wheel, and I'm down one of the spokes. And I kind of wander into one of the cells at the end, and I thought I heard someone with me, which, okay, there could be one of our group with us. I didn't really tell anybody where I was going, which wasn't smart. And as I stopped in the cell to sort of just be quiet and listen, something was banging right next to me against a metal pipe. And my first instinct was, is that you? Thinking there's someone with me and I don't hear anything. And I'm like, okay, maybe not. And I can actually feel the presence right next to me. Like, something's in here and it don't like me. It knows I'm a cop. It don't like me. And so I decide, and I have to find this footage. I know it's on a videotape somewhere. So I thought I paused the camera. I let it hang over my neck on the strap, and I put my little light on, and I start to walk. And I can feel this, whatever it is behind me, right behind me, in the dark. So, of course, I start walking more quickly because whatever is behind me is not happy. It doesn't like me. And I'm not shaking it, so I start to move even quicker to the point where I'm actually running at the end of this cell block into the middle of it. And everybody's looking at me like, what's going on?
Yeah, what's chasing you? Puma? Come on, what's going on?
They said I looked, like, wow. And I have that video somewhere of my feet. So I have to find it because you can see my feet go from a walk to a run in the dark.
Mike, you had the dude run moment.
Well, I always said that they stole that from me, but I can't prove it.
Because isn't that where that happened too? Is dude, run. Yeah.
I ran many years in fear before he did.
That's okay. I can respect that, guys. We've all been there. Each and every one of us has been shaken and going, uh-oh, what did I get myself into?
Well, you have to know when to say, you know what, this isn't healthy for me to be here regardless of what's going on. This doesn't feel safe, and I'm just going to get out of here. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. Do you run into the fact that maybe spirits pick up the fact you're a police officer like they did there? Do you run into that often, or is that a rare occurrence?
I think that, like, in certain locations, because we've done other prisons before, and it seems like I can pick up more, like they know. It's almost like, okay, that whatever energy I'm putting off is an energy that they don't like because of that reason.
Yeah, they go, you'll never get me, coppa, you see? That kind of thing, that whole...
And I think, too, like, in Buffalo, New York, we were at an Iron Island museum, and I had the spirit of a little boy touch my hand, and it was a very emotional connection for a few moments with this little boy where it almost felt like, I don't know if he was identifying with me as a protector, as a father, but again, it almost like he picked up on whatever energy I was giving off that made him feel safe for a moment. And, probably one of the most emotional moments in a ghost hunt.
Oh my gosh, children's spirits. Oh,
yeah, very, very sad.
Yeah, that's always sad. Yeah, I don't care who you are, that's sad. Yeah. Very, very sad. And of course, if you were able to bring that child some comfort, that means a lot, Mike. That really does. That means a lot.
And I think that's what it was. And unfortunately, that whatever, there was a couple of negative entity in that room also that made the child leave, and after that was over with that experience, my night was shot. I mean, we wrapped up the investigation after that because I was just done. Mentally and emotionally, I was just done.
Yeah.
And to our point earlier, I think that's something that is really special, to not be the scientist with the evidence and the recordings and stuff, but be able to make that personal connection that, somebody who has been probably gone dead for a long time, and you're able to help them or just even connect with them for a second. There's nothing better than that.
No, definitely. It's probably one of the best experiences that I can honestly say I've had, that, sad and terrible, but at the same time, in terms of a paranormal encounter, it's like, wow.
How many times have you gone and heard at least murmurings about paranormal activity at locations that you've investigated in the past, and you might have a clue to who that victim might have been? Has that ever come in kind of handy?
Hasn't happened yet, but I'm gonna have to keep my my options open on that, because there are some locations that I've actually investigated or know about that would be interesting to see what's going on there.
Yeah, because I've heard that from a couple other people in law enforcement that do dabble in the paranormal, not to your level, but then they'll say, it was kind of funny because they got called to this location, this apartment that I worked, this investigation where a young lady was murdered, and I actually had to go investigate for the people the haunting of the victim, the case that I worked. And They said it was such a surreal thing because they're doing both. Number one, they took care of the legal process, but then they go back and take care of the spiritual process.
That'd be pretty intense.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. So, is there anywhere that you have always wanted to go to investigate for paranormal that you haven't been able to yet? Anywhere?
Oh, definitely Alcatraz is on the top. And, of course, Scotland, to some of those castles out there.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Alcatraz, though, that would be, especially you being a cop. Ooh, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know, Mike. I don't know.
Let me go with you, please. I'd just like to document that.
Yeah,
I would love to be able to do Alcatraz.
Well, it was a lot of fun until Mike got the crab knocked out. We didn't even see what happened. Just something about cops, and that was it. And he went down. I don't know, but
I'd have to take one for the team and do it.
Just make sure we video cam you while it's happening. Get that evidence.
Absolutely.
Get that evidence. Don't let me get beaten up in vain. Get that evidence.
That's right.
We're at the end of another show, Mike and Greg, and really, Mike, it has just been an honor having you on again. Really enjoy talking with you as always. And again, pick up Mike's great book that's out there. The True Crime, of course. You know him for paranormal. Pick up his True Crime. You're going to be just as impressed with that. The Murder of Richard Jennings, the true story of New York's first murder for hire. Pick that up. Go to Amazon. Get it. You can get it really anywhere. Barnes & Noble, everything else. But again, that's Michael J. Worden. And thanks again, Mike, for coming on the show. And Greg, thank you so much for being my awesome co-host again for another week.
My pleasure.
And then, of course, make sure this weekend, clear your calendar. Come join us at the infamous Palmer House. Visit GhostBumpMinnesota.com. Get your tickets. Get them because they are on sale. Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM. And please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.